So UFC Fight Night Mexico is officially in the books, and I want to give my reaction and thoughts to the main event, Brandon Moreno versus Lone'er Kavanagh, because the flyweight division has a superstar on their hands. And I'm here to say that not only do I think that the flyweight division is now the best division in the UFC, but I think that it is the most exciting. If you look at the current landscape of the flyweight division, there are just savages all over the place, man. And the youth and the versatility and the different styles and the striking. I mean, this weight class, it is the best that flyweight has ever been. I've never been this excited about the flyweight division. So to me, in my opinion, it's the best weight class in the UFC right now. It's deep. There's so much talent. And now we have a new player in the game in Lone'er Kavanagh. He heads to Mexico City in a 5-round main event against a legend, an OG, a former champion, a staple that has been around at the top of the weight class for forever in Brandon Moreno, and he just put on an absolute clinic. He put on a clinic. He absolutely destroyed Brandon Moreno. And I know when you look at the stats, it looks so close and this and that. That fight to me when I was watching in real time was not close whatsoever. Lone'er Kavanagh was dominating Brandon Moreno, dotting him up on the feet, outstriking him, outsmarting him, outmaneuvering him, right? And we know that Brandon Moreno, right, he's got a solid ground game. But for me, he was going to have to push the action and get in the face of Lone'er Kavanagh and try to drag this thing out to the mid to later rounds, given that we've seen Kavanagh have some issues with the gas tank. And now there's no issues with the gas tank. Lone'er Kavanagh goes out there and is having a ton of success against Charles Johnson, then ends up getting knocked out after his cardio starts to fade. The gas tank starts to kind of wear down. Charles Johnson puts it on him, which, by the way, how about Charles Johnson? Turns out if you're a really good prospect and you get knocked out by Charles Johnson, a belt is in your future, man. Like, Charles Johnson's got one of the weirdest careers in the history of the sport. Knocks out all the prospects, then he gets his big opportunity to break through, and then he gets knocked out or loses, man. It's just absolutely crazy. I mean, Charles Johnson's a tough out. He's a tough out for anybody, and especially when you're a young prospect on the rise, you got all this hype, you got all the, the crazy striking, the knockout power that Kavanagh has, and you get thrown in there, and okay, so you get checked. But how do you bounce back? Boy, did he bounce back in a big way. He comes out here, and to me, he almost knocked out Brandon Moreno, which was crazy because we know how durable Brandon is. But the fact that he was able to sustain and contain himself for 25 minutes at just such a methodical and precise pace was just very, very impressive. Very impressive. It was such a poised and veteran-like performance by a young fighter in Kavanagh, man. And the way that he, introduced the calf kick so early on into the fight was it was beautiful, man. And that, to me, was kind of the tale of two tapes here, was the fact that Kavanagh looked unbelievably prepared, had a specific game plan that he wanted to use against Brandon Moreno, to where it looked like Brandon was just kind of freelancing out there. It didn't feel like he had much of a plan to come in here and get after Lone'er Kavanagh. And I do think that what we have going on here is Brandon Moreno, to me, is a shell of himself. Now, that's not to say that a prime Moreno shows up and is able to get it done against that Kavanagh that showed up last night, because Lone'er Kavanagh with a gas tank is a nightmare for everybody in this weight class. We know he's got a solid ground game. He's got very good takedown defense. And on the feet, I mean, this dude can strike with the best of them. His boxing is outstanding. His kicking is outstanding. The front kicks up the middle, punishing the midsection of Moreno, right? And then attacking that lead leg. It was masterful, man. Masterful work, right? Started to welt up the lead leg of Moreno, started to, hinder the movement, which then made him more of a sitting duck to where he could then get his timing going, get his rhythm going with the boxing, and Kavanagh just tore him apart on the feet, man. Absolutely tore him apart. And I feel like after a couple rounds, Moreno's like, wow, this kid's good, man. This kid's good. And I feel like Moreno basically made the decision to try to hang on and survive. That's what it felt like to me, because Brandon Moreno pushing him up against the fence and landing a few knees up against the cage, not doing anything, he was not going to win the fight that way. So to me, it felt like Moreno made the decision to basically concede to lose a decision to Lone'er Kavanagh. Because Brandon Moreno in the later rounds, he needed to be separating and doing everything he can to get after Kavanagh, push a pace, and try to get the finish. And there wasn't any urgency there. There wasn't any urgency whatsoever, but I feel like a lot of that was Lone'er Kavanagh was getting to Brandon Moreno. Every time Brandon would try to open up with the boxing, Kavanagh would just tag him. He would sting him. He would hurt him. And he almost knocked him out. I mean, almost knocking out Brandon Moreno was crazy, man. And I know that this isn't the Brandon Moreno from a few years ago, but it is still very impressive because we know Brandon is very well-rounded. Very well-rounded. Has a good ground game, good submission skills, very good striking on the feet. I just thought Moreno was going to come out, push the pace early, look to grapple early even, push him up against the fence. A lot of the strategy we saw Moreno using later in the fight, I feel like if he did that a little earlier, which I know is, kind of dangerous given how explosive Kavanagh is early in the fight, but you knew that. You knew Kavanagh was going to be the most dangerous, especially in those first 2 rounds, right? Why are you not trying to wear on him? Why are you not trying to tire him out? Why are you not fighting behind the jab? Why are you getting a little sloppy and reckless when you're throwing the combinations to where you're going to leave yourself open to being countered by the sharp, precise power hitter in Kavanagh? So to me, there were just so many question marks on what Brandon Moreno was, like, what was the game plan? I would have been going after the body. I would have been pressuring the heck out of Kavanagh, putting the jab in his face, trying to back him up with good straight shots. Don't throw these winging punches like Moreno was dipping his head and getting real wild because you're going to open, yourself up to being countered by Kavanagh, who's the younger, faster fighter. And that was on display. That was on display. And now there is a real legit player added into the mix at the top of the flyweight division. And this division right now is loaded, man. It's absolutely loaded, and it's mainly strikers, right? You got Pantoja, right? You got Tyra, you got some grapplers in there. But these dudes that are on the rise with the striking, they are nasty. They're nasty, and Kavanagh, to me, it felt like he was really up against it, right? You're in a 3-rounder, your cardio lets you down, you get stopped by Charles Johnson. How do you bounce back? You're in a 5-rounder in Mexico City at elevation against a fighter of the caliber of Brandon Moreno. And it's like, well, man, if you're gassing basically after 2 rounds, what's going to happen in a 5-rounder against a guy that we know can push the pace that's very well-rounded? And this, to me, was all about Lone'er Kavanagh and the evolution that he has made in his game. To go from losing to Charles Johnson to then bouncing back and improving and fixing the cardio issue and being so methodical out there, man, it was beautiful to watch. Are you kidding me, Lone'er Kavanagh, man? Like, that was an amazing performance. It was an amazing performance. I feel like there's 2 things at play here. Like I was saying, I do think that there is that side where Brandon Moreno, to me, he's a shell of himself. He's a shell of himself. And a lot of it is the urgency is no longer there. There's no urgency, right? And I understand that people are like, oh, it was kind of a close fight. And when you look at the totals and you look at the stat, to me, when I was watching in real time, the fight was not close. It wasn't close. Kavanagh was dictating the pace. He was picking apart Moreno on the feet, landing the way more damaging shots. And even when Moreno was able to push him up against the cage, he wasn't doing anything with it. Wasn't doing anything with it. Wasn't really advancing the position. Lone'er Kavanagh's got good takedown defense. We know he's got a solid ground game. And on the feet, man, now that this guy has fixed the cardio problem, and I feel like a lot of it was maybe being more efficient with the energy and probably him coming into a 5-round fight knowing, okay, I can't get wild here. I can't get super reckless and throw a bunch of power shots and fatigue myself because I got 25 minutes in here with a legend in Brandon Moreno. So maybe that kind of helped with the mindset a little bit. I need to be a little bit more tactical, a little bit more smooth, a little more methodical. And that's exactly what we saw in this fight. And to me, this felt like, maybe this is the scenario where, you're kind of feeding a prospect in Kavanagh where he just got knocked out by Charles. You're putting him in there, against a guy like Moreno. And maybe this gets Moreno back on track with a win after losing to Tyra. And then there was that side of it. Well, we've seen when Joshua Van got thrown in on short notice against Brandon Royval, and they went to, they had a crazy war. That was an amazing fight. And Joshua Van gets the win, and then boom, finds himself in a title fight. Right, and it felt like maybe that's what the UFC was looking at here, right? Was throwing, even, beside the fact that it's going to be a fun fight, right? Striker's delight between Moreno and Kavanagh. But it was the fact that now Kavanagh can go in there against a guy like Brandon Moreno and take his spot in the rankings. Go out there and have that Joshua Van-like approach, right? Where you go out there, you beat a guy like Royval, and you get yourself right into the mix. And that is basically what Lone'er Kavanagh just did. That's what Lone'er Kavanagh just did, man. And to me, to go out there and do that in a 5-round fight at elevation where your gas tank was the biggest question and you answered that question, this kid's for real, man. He's for real. He's devastating. And the way that he approached Brandon Moreno was brilliant. Throwing the front kicks up the middle, battering the midsection, completely obliterated the lead leg, which we know that Moreno's got that boxing heavy style, right? The high guard kind of rocking back and forth, very heavy on that lead leg, so he's putting all that weight on there, so you're going to be able to blast the lead leg, which is brilliant. Takes away, some of the sting on the jab, makes it harder for him to move, explode in and out of range. That was a beautiful performance by Kavanagh, man. Technically and methodically broke down a world-class fighter in Brandon Moreno. Now that the gas tank issue seems like it has been solved, Lone'er Kavanagh is a legit threat at the top of the flyweight division. And in terms of potential matchups, I mean, I know we got Van versus Tyra coming up, right? We got Kyoji Horiguchi, who just got a win against Amir Albazi. Maybe they do that, right? Kavanagh versus Horiguchi. Kavanagh versus Brandon Royval, who's coming off of a devastating KO loss to Manel Kape. Maybe they do Kape, right? That would be a very fun fight. I mean, Manel Kape, to me, should be in the title conversation, but they gave it to Tyra. Then you got Pantoja, right, waiting in the wings, who should walk back into a title shot whenever he's healthy and ready to go. So I feel like, it's a little bit murky at the top of the weight class, but it is a dang exciting time for the flyweight division. We got some amazing strikers, amazing fighters, man. And Lone'er Kavanagh, this dude is for real. He's absolutely for real, man. Absolutely for real. I thought that the 5-rounder, like in a 3-rounder, I could see a scenario where he goes out there, the power, the first couple rounds, he's beating up Moreno. Moreno starts to pour it on late, but it's enough for Kavanagh to get it done. But to go into a situation where you're at elevation, you've shown cardio problems throughout your career, and your cardio looks great for 25 minutes against a guy like Moreno, beyond impressive. He put on a clinic. It was an amazing performance by Lone'er Kavanagh, man. I could not believe what I was seeing, to be honest with you. And the fact that he almost knocked him out is crazy, because we know how durable Moreno is. But that speaks to the timing, the accuracy, and the power that Kavanagh brings to the table. So it's going to be interesting to see, what the UFC does with him next, because flyweight's stacked. It's kind of murky towards the top right now, given, the way it went down with Van and Pantoja and kind of how that all plays out. But could you imagine Kavanagh versus Kape, Kavanagh versus Royval? Like, there are some amazing matchups, man. And this guy, now that he's got the gas tank fixed, we know his striking is really, really good. And with that precision and power, he just put the entire division on notice with that statement win over Brandon Moreno. Beyond impressive, man. But at the same time, I feel like Brandon Moreno, it feels like the end of his career is very near. He's still kind of young, right? When you look at the age, you're like, oh, he's still young. But in terms of the fight years and in terms of the miles and the damage that he's had and the wars with Figueiredo and Pantoja and all those kinds of things, I feel like a lot of that has added up, and it has really slowed down Brandon throughout his career. There just hasn't been much urgency to me in his past few fights, and then to come in here against a devastating prospect in Kavanagh, he should have been attacking the body, pushing the pace on him, looking to mix it up early to try to wear on him and drag him in to those later rounds. Because the fact that Kavanagh went out there and dominated and controlled the pace and range, and it was very impressive, man. Everything that it almost felt like Moreno was going to do coming into this fight is exactly what Kavanagh was able to do to him. I'm blown away by the performance that Kavanagh put on, man. And I feel like it is one of the more impressive performances that we have seen from a young fighter in the UFC recently. Game-changing type of performance by Lone'er Kavanagh. The UFC called, he answered, took the risk, steps in there. It felt like he was battling tons of different adversity here, and goes out there and puts on the best performance of his career and beats up on Brandon Moreno. But if you guys enjoyed this video, if you could do me a favor, please give it a like. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And overall, I thought it was a pretty solid card, man. Thought it was a solid card. Zellhuber, the Zellhuber experiment, it needs to end. He's not UFC caliber. Get him out of the UFC, man. Getting beaten up by the old heads, right? And again, vintage Bobby Green stunting on him. Absolutely picked him apart, knocked him out. Absolutely crazy after getting completely danced on by Michael Johnson. I've never seen someone with the frame of Daniel Zellhuber that just stands at range. It basically does nothing. He's slow. He's lethargic. He should not be in the UFC whatsoever. He's just been taking beating after beating. And I thought the card was entertaining, man. Thought the card was very entertaining. So just wanted to give my thoughts there. And how about Moutinho and Jose Medina, man? Two of the worst fighters to ever do it in the UFC. I don't know why the UFC kind of has these guys around. I feel like a lot of it is to just kind of build these prospects, so to speak. But I'm happy they got an opportunity. They should not be in the UFC whatsoever, man. They're clearly not the UFC caliber whatsoever. And they just keep getting beaten up in these fights, which is kind of tough to watch at this point. But if you guys enjoyed this, subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it. I'll see you next time.